Micah chapter number 6. Micah 6, follow along here as I just read through it, the 16 verses. Verse 1 says, Hear ye now what the Lord saith. Arise, contend thou before the mountains, and let the hills hear thy voice. Hear ye, O mountains, the Lord's controversy, and ye strong foundations of the earth. For the Lord hath a controversy with his people, and he will plead with Israel. O my people, what have I done unto thee? And wherein have I wearied thee? Testify against me. For I brought thee up out of the land of Egypt, and redeemed thee out of the house of servants, and I sent before thee Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. O my people, remember not what Balak the king of Moab consulted, and what Balaam the son of Beor answered him from Shittim unto Gilgal, that ye may know the righteousness of the Lord? Wherewith shall I come before the Lord, and bow myself before the high God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves of a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, or with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. The Lord's voice crieth unto the city, and the man of wisdom shall see thy name. Hear ye the rod, and who hath appointed it? Are there yet the treasures of wickedness in the house of the wicked, and the scant measure that is abominable? Shall I count them pure with the wicked balances, and with the bag of deceitful weights? For the rich men thereof are full of violence, and the inhabitants thereof I have spoken lies, and their tongue is deceitful in their mouth. Therefore also will I make thee sick in smiting thee, and making thee desolate because of thy sins. Thou shalt eat, but not be satisfied, and thy casting down shall be in the midst of thee. And thou shalt take hold, but shalt not deliver. And that which thou deliverest will I give up to the sword. Thou shalt sow, but thou shalt not reap. Thou shalt tread the olives, but thou shalt not anoint thee with oil, and the sweet wine, but shalt not drink wine. For the statutes of Omri are kept, and all the works of the house of Ahab, and ye walk in their counsels, that I should make thee a desolation, and the inhabitants thereof an hissing. Therefore ye shall bear the reproach of my people. Micah chapter number 6. It's the beginning of this sort of the third sermon of Micah. Hear ye now, as they begin. Hear, hear, hear. Chapter number 6 begins with that. 6 and 7 is the third sermon of sorts to the Israel, to the people, really, to the nation as a whole. Any thoughts or observations out of here before I give you what I got? Verse 8 is the go-to one in this. Yep. We'll say some more on that in a minute. Yeah. Rhiannon? I don't know why Landy is. Did he? Very good. Yes. Yeah, it's a great song, little chorus out of Micah 6:8. He showed thee, O man. Yeah, it's a great little chorus. Well worth our learning, or at least singing it more often. Any other observations out of here? There's some good verses in here if you have a look. And just little nuggets that are worth. Verse 3, anybody? Ben? Yeah. Yeah. No, it is true. Like, how do you actually please God? Is it with the sacrifices? Because that's how they would view it. If I just bring more sacrifices and more sacrifices, surely God will be more pleased. And he's like, no, I don't want like rivers of blood flowing down the streets. There is a place. That's exactly where verse 8 comes in. What does it look like? Well, he's told you what he actually likes. What is God like? Well, he likes justice. If you were to read through Jeremiah, you'd see these same things come up later on. They never actually deal with this and never get it right, and they don't actually do justice. They're not doing justice. He likes justice. He loves mercy, and he loves and delights when people walk humbly. What they can simply mean is to do justly is to do right according to truth and facts. Because when those judges were judging, they weren't judging according to truth and facts. They were judging to, okay, what can benefit me? What kickbacks can I get here? That's not justice. They were doing it with their own selfish intent. They do it for money. They judge for money and judge for $1. He says, no, God says, I hate that. Could you imagine standing before God and he is the judge and he acts that way? You have to come to God and say, right, I'll give you a kickback to get into heaven. Like, that's not God at all. That's not how he operates. It's not like, give me a kickback and I'll just like let it slide. He's like, no, I am what is right and what is wrong. I was reading Exodus this morning again, and just reading when they come through the Red Sea, and it says in Miriam in her song, she says that the Lord, how does it say, that the Lord is a Lord of hosts or armies or war or battle. I can't remember what it is. He's a God of war. And you think, man, hang on, this is not very politically correct. This is not what people want to talk about. But God is a God of war. He will go to war against his enemies. And he is a God of justice and right and wrong. And he is laid out here. He says, you do justly. If you do what's right, if you do what's truly just, according to the facts, and don't be judged according to preferential treatment of whether someone is rich or poor, or whether they can bring you something, or whether they cannot bring you something, or whether it'll make you look better for being around that person or not. He says, no, don't judge by that. Just do what's right. Judge what is right. And he says, God says, I love that. Do justly. Judge, do right according to truth and facts. Love mercy is to delight in gracious forbearance. Mercy, to delight in gracious forbearance, to forbear where you just want to bring all of your wrath and all of your anger and just like, to actually be merciful and to be graciously forbearing, to forbear it, long-suffering, and delight in mercy, because God says, I delight in mercy. And he says, I delight, not only does he delight in mercy, but he delights when his children walk in mercy. And not only does he delight in justice, he delights when his children act justly. That's what he delights in. You can come and bring a sacrifice. It's easy to bring a cow. It's easy to bring a calf of the 1-year-old, is what he's saying. It's easy to do that and have a hatred in your heart and just go through a religious thing. It doesn't affect the heart. But to do justice affects your heart. To have mercy affects the heart. He says, and also to walk humbly with thy God. To walk humbly means behave without elevation of self, which is very hard because we are so consumed by ourselves and our own thoughts and our own little world. But God walks humbly. The God of all the universe walks humbly. He's not consumed with himself. And he walks humbly. And so he says, this is what I delight in. And when you come to bow down, and I was struck by that word, because how many times do you and I bow down before God? Because that's what he says. When you come to bow down, like it's something that should be done on a regular basis, and I look over here to see Connor and can't help but think when he preached last year, or this year, whenever it was, time goes, about repentance and actually coming and bowing down and actually having a time being deliberate to say, right, I'm going to bow down before God. When was the last time you bowed down before God? You might have just bowed your head at the meal to pray, but that's not what he's meaning. He's meaning actually prostrating yourself down before God, lowering yourself and bowing down before him. Wherewith shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before the high God? Bow yourself before the high God. In your prayers, try getting low. Remember in Bible college, they were doing in personal spiritual development about prayer, and he said, he says, you don't have to pray like this. He says, but I sometimes try and just lay prostrate, and I can't remember which lecturer it was, to lay completely on the ground as low as I can to pray before God, just to lower myself. And I think, man, and it gave me a picture like, wow, that's someone that's actually just, even in a physical sense, but they're trying to be low before God and acknowledging their position before him. To bow down before God. And offerings are easy. They are. Their offerings are easy. But justice and mercy and love are not easy. They come from a right heart. And God delights in justice, love, mercy, and humility. Verse number 3, and I also thought was a good verse. O my people, what have I done unto thee? And wherein have I wearied thee? Testify against me. Testify against me. God is saying, right, stand up. Tell me, what have I done? Why is it that you're not giving me your devotion? Why are you walking off and committing adultery, spiritual adultery with this God and this God? And why is my house empty? Testify against me. What have I done that you would walk away from me? Nothing. And I can't help but think of the people that I've spoken to in my generation who have walked away from God. And I've said to them, and to numerous ones, not just to one, but to numerous of them, right, and you've mentioned this, and they mention the same three things over and over is what I hear all the time. The pastor, the school, the church that I went to. They're the three that gets mentioned on a repeat basis. And you know what they're testifying against? I'm not in church today and I don't want anything to do with God because of the A, B, and C. Okay? None of that has anything to do with God. 0. Testify against God. What has God done against you? Rightly or wrongly, whatever you may think in your childhood and growing up, what about God? Because I know he's never failed you. Josh is preaching this week, and saw it on Facebook. Some of you may have seen it on Facebook on the Coalfields page if you're on that. And he is, I find no fault in him, is what he's preaching for Easter. Because when Jesus came before Pilate, that's exactly what he declared. I've searched him, I've asked him, and you've said you find fault in him, but I find no fault in him. And when you search Jesus, what can you actually lay at his feet as guilty? Like what? Seriously, nothing. I can't think of a single thing. He healed the sick. What a terrible individual. He came and died for us. Oh, that's horrendous, isn't it? Why would someone be so selfish? Like, what are you going to testify against him? And then God is saying the same thing. What are you going to testify? Why? Come, lay it on me. What is your actual issue with me? Come serve me. Testify against me. Where have I wearied thee? What have I done? Oh, that's quite a powerful question to ask. There. Verse 11 is another thing that I think probably ties in with them, their dishonesty and always trying to find a dollar. The amount of times in the Bible that the unjust weight is made mention of. It says, shall I count them pure with wicked balances and with the bag of deceitful weights? It means like when they're in the marketplace and they have the scales and you have to have a fair, just balance on this side to say, right, we're going to buy a homer of barley. My mind escaped me for a minute. I was going kilos. I'm like, no, it wasn't kilos. If you have a homer of barley, right, and so then you balance it out. But if this is unjust weight, and they make it under the balance of a homer, then they're shortchanging the person. They're paying for a homer, and they're getting less. It's off the balances. So he says, man, this trick must have been so prevalent in their day and for generations and generations, because Solomon speaks about it in Proverbs. It's mentioned somewhere else, and I can't remember where else it's mentioned in the Old Testament, and it's mentioned here about unjust weights and unjust balances. It's like trying to rip people off in just little bits here and there so that no one would notice. Just pour in less or give less here and there. And God says, I actually hate it. I actually hate it. If you're going to charge someone a kilo, give them a kilo. And if you're giving them 990 grams, God says, I hate it. But that's man to say, I'm going to keep 10 grams for myself, or I'll keep 100 grams for myself. I'm going to shortchange. And God says, this is the stuff that undermines a whole society, where today we think it's nothing of it. We think absolutely nothing of it. Yet God cared about 100 grams because it was so prevalent that it wasn't the 100 grams that God cared about. It's the spirit and the heart that makes you want to keep 100 grams, deliberately deceiving and saying one thing and doing another. It goes against the very character and nature of God. He hates it. And he lays it out again here, an unjust balance and deceitful weights. Just, he says, no, I'm not for this. And he says, you want to know why you're why you're sowing and you can't reap, and why you're treading the olives and you're not anointing oil, and you want to know why you've got the sweet wine but you're not drinking any of it. You're going through the process and you're doing it all. And he says, go check your balances. Go check the little things in your life. The little unjust things where you're ripping someone off 100 grams and you're wondering why you're not getting the rewards out of the olive fields and out of the vineyards, and you're not getting the big rewards from God. He says, because the little things in your life, you're ripping little people off and trying to hide it, and I'm withholding from you big blessings because of the little things in your life. And how often does that happen? We just overlook the little things and think they're inconsequential. God says, I see the little things, and it's the heart, and I can't bless this heart. And you've got your olive trees, and you've got your vineyards, and you've got all this, but you're not bringing anything into the storehouse. Go check the little things in your life. So there's some good preaching here, and skimming over it. Any other thoughts out of this chapter before we close up? But there's some good stuff there. Go back and read it and see what he's actually saying. All right, find a prayer partner or two.